Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 376. I'm delighted to welcome on the podcast today, Kieran Berry. Kieran, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you very much. I'm not too bad at all. Just getting over the Christmas break and getting my brain back into the swing of things in the WSL season. So yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Good man. Well, I really appreciate you coming in. I know you might be a little bit sleep deprived at the minute as well.
Yeah. As I said, like yeah, it's adapting to being a father. Yeah, it takes a lot out of you, but yeah, like I said, I wouldn't change it for the world. But probably when I delve into some of those things that I'm going to go in today, if you remind me about that, we're also trying to talk about like how I've actually kind of changed as a practitioner since I've had my child as well. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's definitely humbled me in so many different ways. So yeah.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, we'll dive into it, mate. We always, as I say on these podcasts, we always start in the same place, and that's we want to learn about you and your background. So give us a little bit of insight into the roles, the clubs you've been at, and then take us up to what you're doing now as well.
Yeah, so I started off did undergrad sports therapy at Teesside University. Prior to that, obviously, I was at college, did BNC and stuff like that, which was really good. But theoretically, what I wanted to do was be in football. It was very interesting. Just wanted to be in football. Didn't quite know how I wanted to be in football. Just wanted to be in football. And then I kind of sat down with my tutors, and they were like, "Look, you've got physiotherapy, you've got sports therapy." Again, didn't really ever want to work in a hospital as such, so I went down the sports therapy route. That was up until 2014. As you do once you graduate, you want to get into a football club and emailed all the football clubs, as you can imagine, from top to bottom. Obviously, start off very ambitious in the Premier League, and then you start working your way down and realizing that hey, actually, this isn't going to be as easy as you may assume. Had probably out of all the clubs in the leagues, probably only had two replies, and then that's when my tutor at the time was like, "Look, have you ever thought about non-league football?" And obviously, non-league football is completely different now in comparison to what it used to be. But I was very fortunate that I emailed Tamworth Football Club, and yeah, same thing. Look, we've got anyone that I can, come and work under, and understand the trade and learn the trade. And yeah, they actually replied to me the next day and said they're actually looking for a actual first team physio, first team sports therapist, as their therapist had left. So it kind of fell in my lap in that perspective. But it was obviously a voluntary role, so my very first season there was voluntary, and it was a very big eye opener. University helps you to so many different ways, but obviously when you're out there in the real world with the different characters, yeah, it's really humbling. It really challenges you as a person. Can challenge your characteristics. At times it was really really hard, but obviously looking back at it now, like I feel like it's really helped me work within football. As we all know, football can be a very hard industry to work in, and obviously when people look outside in, it looks great, but obviously there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. But yeah, like I said, it was a very interesting one. I met up with the manager like a month later, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm willing to take an opportunity on you." Again, obviously it was voluntary, so I still had to work beside that. Which I was actually working as sports director at the time, so having to balance that out, that was fun. Having to work at 6 o'clock in the morning to try and get some form of money to fund what you're going to do next. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of sports therapists out there who have probably had to live that experience. It's very hard because you don't necessarily know what's going to come of it. Sure, everyone has this ambition that they want to go places, but I was very fortunate that after the first season they then kept me on and then started to pay me, which was really, really good. And on the back of having that role for a year, and then I was able to get a job at Aston Villa Football Club with the Academy Boys as a part-time sports therapist. So yeah, I was at Tamworth for I think it was 4 seasons, and well, 4.5 seasons, and I was at Aston Villa for 3.5 seasons. Coming near the end of my time at both football clubs was the part where I was like, okay, what do I do next? The sports therapy, absolutely loved it. Obviously back in those days, which makes me feel old now, but back in those days there wasn't many opportunities in full-time football as a sports therapist. Obviously now there's a lot more. Obviously it's still congested, but there's obviously more opportunities. So it was kind of okay, back to the drawing board, and I was very fortunate that I had a good mentor at Aston Villa, Dean Madden, who basically sat me down and he was like, "Look, you've got two opportunities here. You can go into the physio and go down that route, or actually, if it's the rehab type of thing that you like, to go more the S and C route." So again, as I said at the start, didn't necessarily want to be a physio. It's just, again, working in a hospital environment is just not something that was really interested me. So I went down the S&C route. So in my last season at Tamworth and Aston Villa, I was then doing my masters at the same time. Again, that was a very hard experience. Absolutely loved the course. It's probably my most favourite course I've done. But again, as you can imagine, you're doing part-time Tamworth Football Club, who then had an academy, and then they had an under 21s team, and then you had Aston Villa. I was pretty much doing something every single day. But looking back at it, it's probably one of the worst things that I could have done in regards to overworking myself. And I think that's probably the first time in any situation where I've actually realized I've come to a limit. And again, good experience from that, because then you start to learn a lot more about yourself as a person. So I had to cut down some of my hours. As you can imagine, you're getting this money, you think, yeah, I want to keep the money, and I want to also do education. But when you put them both together, it can be quite hard. So yeah, I had to cut down some of my hours there. Very fortunate to have worked with Pete Mundy at the time. He's, again, good mentor of mine at Coventry University. Really helped me out so much. And yeah, like I said, graduated there in 2018. It then opened up the doors where, again, obviously I wanted to try and get into full-time football. Obviously I wasn't going to be able to do that as a sports therapist. Ideally at the time I wanted to be a rehab coach. That's what was my real big interest. At Tamworth I was doing, obviously you can imagine, I was running on the pitch, doing the first aid, doing the rehabs, doing warm-ups. Now obviously that I was starting to do the S&C as well. So I was getting a bit of a holistic approach at the time, and it opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And again, my mindset was all about how can I prevent injury, or not prevent injury. How can I get these injured players back? How can I get these injured players back? And then by the time I'd finished my masters, it was actually like, well, instead of working with just the injured, why don't I try and stop people getting injured, if that makes sense? Because obviously, you know, it opened my eyes to a thing. Because again, as a therapist, I just came in with the mindset of our rehab. So yeah, that's when obviously my ideology of things slightly changed. And fortunate there at the time, Aston Villa was a guy called Dan Lovium, and he actually allowed me to come in and do some work with them, with the older age groups, shadowing and all the rest of it. And that kind of gave my first insight to what it's like to be in the S&C world. Then an opportunity came up at Swansea. That was 2019. That was working with their 9s to 14s. Again, jumps right into it. Probably didn't think much about it in regards to that you're moving. You know, you go to university and, you know, you move away and you just think, oh, I've moved away. But then you realize that you make a lot of friends in that area. Whereas obviously this time I've obviously moved away from home, and I'm actually like, so this is actually me, or could be me for however long, I'm not too sure. So again, really great opportunity. Allowed me to really just focus on my S&C, try a different lifestyle as well. Probably the best place I've ever lived, Swansea, actually, having the beach literally on your doorstep. I was there I think I left there in 2023. And by the end of my time there, I'd obviously gone from working the 9s to 14s to the 9s to 16s to 18s, 23s, up until head of athletic development, which was a really good role. And again, a role that's really like helped structure me as a practitioner and as a person. Again, having to deal with those pressures of expectation, having to deal with the pressures of an audit, for argument's sake. Like you said, being in those conversations with some of the people at the very top of the board within a football structure. So yeah, I was still very young then. How long was that? 3 years. So I would have been what, 26, 27. So still very young then. And obviously, as you can imagine, when you're experiencing things for the first time, don't always have everything to drop back onto, like, how do I deal with this in this scenario, and how do I deal with that? So Swansea was really good from that perspective, and like how you interact with the people, how do you try and get the best out of people. And like I said, I was there for 3 years, and then I came to Nottingham Forest. That was 2022 to 2023 season. So I joined there in March, and I left in the following March. And that was a great experience, working with Ronan Kavanagh at the time. Really, really enjoyed it there. Different experience. Obviously, they're also a Cat 1 football club. But yeah, an opportunity to go from, now I can compare one football club to another. And I think it's really good that people get those experiences. Yes, it's really good to stay at one football club and really establish yourself. I think that's really, really important. But I feel like even though I was only there for a year, it really, really helped me develop as a practitioner, because again, you're working with different people and you're seeing different things. But yeah, again, really enjoyed time at Swansea. Yeah, still speak to quite a lot of the different S&C practitioners that are there and have gone on to do really good things. We had a really good internship program there, and a lot of them have gone on to now working in football, and that's something I'm really, really proud of, to be fair, just being able to help other people. I think looking back at the industry, probably when I first started to now, probably people didn't really help each other out. So it's really nice to be able to actually have been in a position where you can help people out. I think it's really, really important. And then that brings me to where I am now. Back in the Midlands, back at home, at Aston Villa Football Club with the women. And if I'm honest with you, it's the best decision I ever made. Really, really, really enjoy the job. I can't really express how much I enjoy it there. Again, different pressure, obviously back in like a first team environment. Again, different type of athletes that you're working with. But that was the reason why I went. I wanted to stretch myself. I wanted to try and push myself to another level now of, okay, you've done the academy, you've done 21s, and you've done a bit of first team at a lower level. But now it was like, okay, it's a new project, an exciting project as well. I absolutely love it. And I think I've developed so much as an individual and so much as a coach. Because when you work in one industry with the same type of athletes, your mind can just be fixated to one aspect of performance. Whereas like now it's really opened my mind to so many different things. And, there's so much more things in the women's game that needs to be explored. And that's something that I really like about it. The fact that I know when you go to most research, it's more about the male athlete, but there's so much more about the female athlete. And it's so important to not just treat a female athlete like a male athlete, if that makes sense. Really, really, really enjoyed really, really have enjoyed my time at Aston Villa Women, and have come on leaps and bounds in terms of the infrastructure that we've got there. And it's nice being part of that journey. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things, really. Sorry to go on, but I think that's probably one of the biggest things in life, really, is being part of something, if that makes sense. You can look back in years' time and go, well, actually, I was a part of this transition. So I really, really enjoy it for that perspective. And there's so much more levels that we can go with it. And that's what's really exciting about being at Aston Villa Women.
Yeah, it's a brilliant breakdown. I said to you before we recorded, I love getting into people's backgrounds because of that. You've done a brilliant job there, not just talking about what roles you've been in, but the sort of decisions that went with going into those roles, what you've then taken out of those roles. I think it's a brilliant breakdown. And I think the big thing for the listeners to take away is that you've mentioned there all the different experiences that you've had with different aged athletes, different genders, different, obviously first team, and all the different academy ages and everything as well, which has led you into this role now, which we'll obviously dive into a bit more about what you're doing now with the team at Villa. But I think it's a really fascinating backstory of yourself that all these experiences you've ticked off have created the practitioner that you are now. And what you've spoke about before as well, about sort of the therapist into rehab, into S&C, this transition, it seemed like you were very forward thinking within your career as well, that you knew that the phrase that you used before, and I apologize if I don't get it spot on, but what you said basically about treating an injury and then switching the mindset to how do we negate as many injuries as we can. And I think it's a very forward-thinking mindset, that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I said, for me, I have a passion for helping people first and foremost. It was just, instead of, like I said, it was just having a more of an open mindset. Like I said, currently I'm at Aston Villa Women, so I came in as the first team S&C coach. So I predominantly do the physical preparation, obviously the S&C program, the testing, the rehab, and a little bit of the monitoring in the background as well, and some of the GPS work. And my role there has expanded and all sorts while I've been in there, and been in like an interim management role at times as well. So again, it's been really, really, really good. A really good opportunity, and I think with every opportunity you have to be grateful and humble with that. So like I said, now we've got a bit of a bigger structure now, so we've got a lot more staff now in the building. Currently now I'm mainly focusing on the off pitch in regards to the rehab. So it's almost come back full circle. And again, really, really enjoying it. Obviously there's different injury profiles within the women's game. I know there's the big thing about the ACLs, but football's football first and foremost. And I think that's something that I really wanted to get across in this podcast. Yes, obviously women are susceptible to a ACL injury, but football is football. It's really, really exciting times. Like I said, it's good. It's really good at the moment, so I can't complain. but yeah, I'll delve into, like I said, with my physical development program. And a lot of the things, I've got 5 pillars. So 5 pillars for me, and they all underpin each other. It starts off with mobility. So has a player got mobile joints first and foremost? Yes or no? That's probably my biggest thing, because for me, mobility then underpins the next part, which is your stabilization of your joints, your stabilization of your trunk, both isometrically and dynamically. Obviously, isometrically, so that they can actually perform movements in a correct manner, so they've got control over their body, but then also from a dynamic perspective to actually be able to produce efficient force. My next thing there goes into movement capacity. Again, I use the word toolbox. How much can we express and challenge this toolbox? How much movements can we develop? So can we develop you in the hinge pattern? Can we develop you in a frontal plane pattern, sagittal pattern? Yes, that's not a problem, but it's not just all about heavy load. It's about, okay, can we do like a plate cycle? A plate cycle might be a courtesy lunge into a lateral lunge. Again, when I've come into some football clubs, you can imagine it's something quite different, but it's actually quite challenging, and it's an opportunity for me. It's strength and mobility. It's all under the same thing in that capacity, and it's something that I really like to challenge athletes with. As to go through the whole thing where we're talking about expressing and refining the toolbox. These are the type of things that I like to do before a gym session. Just use that for example, and then my other two then is my strength and my power. Again, there's nothing anything different to what we already know. Can we develop unilateral, bilateral strength? Again, in all planes of motion. Again, with power, can we develop power? Can we develop eccentric power, concentric power, elasticity? And for me, again, all those underpin each other. I think it's very easy to just go straight to power and go, okay, we're going to jump this player and all the rest of it. I'm going to go and make them really strong. But if they don't have the stabilization and the mobility and the movement capacity to actually do them, then we're going to actually be undoing ourselves. So I feel that it's one of the biggest things really is really appreciating where we go with mobility and stability. Again, for me, then, like I said, I've got 4 areas of the toolbox, and all they are just extra layers. So you've got developing the toolbox. Now, if you're in an academy environment, that could be your 9s to 12s, for argument's sake, or your YDP. In a first team environment, that might be that I'm working with someone that's got a young training age. So for me, it's all about, okay, movement competency. Again, not trying to overload them as such, because again, if you've got a young training age, you're going to get a lot of fatigue. It's now, how can we now modify that within the bigger picture, which is obviously what they're here to do, which is be a footballer. As they then get on into it, you might have a player now, okay, that's developed, have been there a couple of seasons. You might then go look to challenge the toolbox. Then you then go on to expressing the toolbox and then refining. For me, refining the toolbox is a player who is now at their peak. Whether that be the peak in the 21s, whether that be the peak in your actual first team environment, they're testing, they're good, they've got good power, good strength, good mobility. It's now about actually how can we now just continue to just drop a little bit more and a little bit more into them. In regards to the bigger picture, it all links in together. So I tend to use my morning sessions as an opportunity to work on some of these things. So if we're talking more now about power, I will use them and link them to what's going on to the pitch. So if we know we're on a strength day or an intensive day, depending on what words people like to use, so an accel, decel, change direction day, we're going to have long contact time. We're going to have some form of horizontal projection work. We're going to then have some form of absorbing work. It could be dynamic in terms of, okay, it could be a banded lunge into a decel hold with kettlebells, or it might just be that we just do snap downs. So again, someone who's in the development phase, it might be that they're actually just doing snap downs with minimal load. Whereas someone who's refining, and it's like, okay, well, look, they've done dumbbells, they've done trap bar, they've done it all. They've completed it all as such. Okay, now can we now make it a little bit more, in hindsight, fancy for them to keep them ticking over and ticking over? Where was I? Yeah, so that's what we do on an intensive day to link in them with what's going on the pitch. You've got to think, like you said, we're doing accels, decels, change of directions, different cuts. And again, these are things that we would add into the prep. So it might be that they're doing, for example, a med ball skater, someone who's in the development phase. It might be that someone who's a bit more, who can express a little bit more, express a little bit more of their power. They might be doing like a 45-degree cut to a hop to a cut to a hold. Again, with the mindset of we're trying to plan what we're doing inside to link in what we're going on with outside. I actually cut up there, sorry. Match day +2 is obviously all about our isometrics. Apologies on that one. So that will be isometrics of our hamstrings, our adductors. Again, looking at movement efficiency. So something simple as a plated step down. Where's the alignment of the knee? Where's the alignment of the ankle? Are they sitting into it? Are they pushing too far forward through their ankle, or are they actually sitting into it? So again, something so simple as that is a crucial exercise for me, because if they're getting valgus, it's like, okay, straight away I'm thinking, okay, what can we do? Is it because they're tired, for example? Or if we've been working with a player for a long period of time, you kind of get to know your players and be like, actually, no, this is something that we also now need to reinforce globally, if that makes sense. Linking us then into extensive days. So again, extensive resistance. Everyone uses different words. And again, when I think of that, I think of, okay, quick contact time. If we're looking vertically, we're probably going to sprint on that day, or you're doing bigger space things. So again, can we get some vertical force? So that might be an ankleizer. That might, as a primer, that might be going into some form of drop jump. All right, and then going into some form of landing mechanics with stiff. We want to be nice and stiff when we're landing, and again that links to the sprinting outside.
Coaches, I know you don't have time to network. The season is a busy time, and I know you're in preparation for your next game, but you know the value in your network and networking within football. If you don't have time to network, do this instead. Sign up to the Football Fitness online community. The community is home to hundreds of practitioners based right around the world. As a member, you get access to the very best football fitness content from practitioners like Jerome Peters, Dr. Ben Rosenblatt, and many others. You'll be invited into our members only WhatsApp group, which allows you to participate in regular discussions and share any challenges that you face within your role. You also get discount from some of our partner companies, discount to football fitness events, and early insights into job opportunities within the game. The good news is you can sign up today for free. Sign up to our 30-day free trial.
I'll come back into this if you remind me about how that links into our profiling, because again, that all comes from that. And then on the match day -1, in an ideal world, I would do some form of priming. It's not something that I did at previous clubs, but then I actually started to see a really, really good aspect from it, from a plyometric and neural stimulation from it. Again, it's another opportunity to get another stimulus. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean I have to lift something heavy, but it's something like an ISO hold that links into some form of plyometric exercise that then links into an assisted speed work. So something simple could be a bilateral trap bar hold, immovable, into a CMJ jump, into a banded CMJ, for argument's sake. And within that, you could kind of make that competitive with the players as well. So who can get the best score and just stuff like that, which again, I'll come back to that as well in regards to about getting player buy-in and how you're making gym fun to an extent, making it competitive, can kind of get that buy-in, because let's be honest, not every player wants to be in the gym, which we know once they get to first team level, it can be different. Even at academy levels, not everyone wants to do the gym. Some players just want to be a footballer, and I think sometimes we have to respect that. I know that's not what we all like to hear, but it's a fact. Some people don't want to be in the gym, so it's like, okay, how can we make it as fun for them? Or actually, it might mean with some of those type of players, depending on if they're an experienced player, so you might just sit down with them and actually explain, okay, well, they might just be in a challenge toolbox, or actually they might just be development. They don't want to do this, and this. They want to just get in, get the work done, and get out. And that's fine. That's not a problem, because again, when you're working in a performance environment, it might be that actually they just need to be ticking off because the most important thing is that they're on the pitch. So yeah, I hope that's probably all made sense. And then, like you said, with the pitch, how that interlinks, then again, it's like I'm a big advocate of like game speed. So again, how do you roll into a position to roll out? It might be a lateral shuffle, a cross step. It might then be a combination of coupling of movements where it's a shuffle into a cross step to open it out. Obviously, we still do all that, or would do all that acceleration work as you would do. And in an ideal world, depending on, if you've got the opportunity to, it might be that you actually do some form of like invasion game, for argument's sake. It could be, for example, you're working with a fullback and it's a 1v1 scenario. And there's so many different layers you could do this. You could do it without a ball. So 5x5, probably a little bit bigger. And it's actually, okay, when the player gets past a certain part of the pitch, can you force them one way? There's gates, they have to get through the two gates. And then it might be that, because actually they're going to do 1v1s in a training session. So that's where interlinking and adapting with the coaches is really important, because you can kind of like infiltrate those mechanics before they've actually even done that. And that's something I do feel like, a warm-up is a really good opportunity to actually be able to do that. Again, this is where it's an opportunity for everyone to express their toolbox. Everyone's toolbox is different, but it's an opportunity for everyone to express it. So, yeah, really big fan of that. And whereas your resistance day, obviously, we're looking at sprinting mechanics, and yeah, we want to sprint, but then also for me, trying to be a bit more creative of it. Can we expose the player to different stimuli? So different stimuli might be actually we're doing some disassociation sprinting work where your torso is this direction, but actually I need you to sprint this direction. And again, you can imagine when you do that with players for the first time, they probably think you've got 5 heads because it's like, what are we doing? But then when you actually break it down to them and explain to them, well, actually, when you're sprinting, A, how many times are you actually doing it in a straight line? And B, when you're sprinting, what are you doing? You're watching the ball. Do you get what I mean? So again, I think the industry goes in big circles where it's all about sprint, and I absolutely agree with that. But then you could kind of say we probably went a little bit too far where we're almost trying to get footballers to be sprinters. So it's like, for me, I try and get the balance between the two and add a little bit of context. And like you said, curved accels, curved sprinting is really important. And like you said, getting players to be comfortable with that. And that's where, for example, some of your stabilization work that you could do in the gym, something simple as like a courtesy into a knee drive on a landmine, and using that picture and being like, okay, well, you're in like a diagonal position and you're holding that position. Okay, well, why am I doing this exercise? Well, actually, when you're sprinting and you're going around, you're curving. Well, actually, you need to be able to have the stabilization across your body. That's kind of where they interlink, and that's probably where I'll go a bit more into, like you said, with the players. It's like, I think probably like most practitioners, when you first start, it's like, this is my program. This is it. This is the best program in the world. This is how we're going to do it. And maybe when you work with younger players, you kind of probably do have that thought process, because obviously it's, they're experiencing this for the first time, if that makes sense. And obviously, you are trying to lead them down this pathway. But I think as I've got older and experienced different things, and especially coming into like a first year environment, I've definitely changed that approach. And that's where I think individualizing certain things then becomes really important, because I think for me, then it's like a program is only as good as the people who are doing it.
Yeah.
If a player says to me, oh, I've got this score, I'm really happy, like, thank you. I'm like, well, I said to no, it's not me, it's you. It's just it's the effort that you've put into it. It's never really the practitioner, in my opinion, because you could write the best program, but if the player doesn't do it with a full intent, you're not going to get the maximum of what you put into it. So yeah, like I said, making it fun, explaining to players, because that's one thing that, again, if we're talking about how I've become a better practitioner, one thing that I found when I have now worked with female athletes is that they're very much more inquisitive. And I really like that. Initially, it was a bit of a shock because, as you can imagine, when you're in an academy environment, or just any environment that I've been in, it's like, okay, you need to do this, and they, kind of get on with it. But it was really good. And actually, that was the first time I was like, whoa, that made me feel uncomfortable. But then afterwards, and I reflected on the day, I was like, actually, that's probably one of the best things that's probably ever happened to me, because, again, it's made me develop as a practitioner, because you might sometimes, and I think we've probably all been there, where, you might be trying something and you're not too sure what you're trying. You're seeing something and you're kind of like, okay, can we nudge this and nudge this? And then, like you said, someone, actually, why are you doing that? And it's actually like, oh, okay, actually, yeah, you do need to have complete confidence within yourself of why you're doing something. So, yeah, it's really good that, the players will always ask questions, which is something that I probably haven't really experienced much of in the past. And yeah, so I think that's really good. Then if we're going into more like the profiling, again, that's kind of how you get the buy-in. So I'll do multiple different tests. So, your standard ones, CMJs, drop jumps, ankle ISO, knee ISO, hip ISO, Nordic, hamstring ISO, and let's say, for example, force frame. What I try and do is put all these into categories. So ankle ISO is your sprinting strength. CMJ, okay, well, that could be your absorbing strength, so your braking strength, and it could also be your acceleration strength. Also looking at your peak power. Your frontal plane work or frontal plane stabilization could obviously be your force frame. Knee ISO's deceleration, for I can say you're in that decelerated position. And it's like linking them to a physical trait. So when I do have some of these programs, or if I do show them their results, it's like, okay, this is how it relates to your actual game. Because again, I think that's really important. I think definitely at first team level, I think it's important across the board, but I think definitely at first team level, where players have different motives for what they want to be in the gym for. Some people just want to get stronger. Some people actually, who are a bit younger, they're trying to, for example, maximize their potential. So it's important for me that they know why and why we're doing certain things. So yeah, I always use those type of tests, and the metrics that we use are always then going to be relative to them as a person. So what it's like, some players might get 700 on a Nord board, and another player might only get 400, for argument's sake. But when you make it relative, they might actually be relative the same strength. And I think that's probably a hole that naturally we probably all kind of fell in initially in S&C, where it's like, oh, well, this is the benchmark's 400 or the benchmark's 500, or for example, the CMJ's 40, for argument's sake. Whereas obviously now it's more like, okay, well, how do we get there? Okay, they've jumped. Okay, they've got a good score. If I'm honest, sometimes I don't even really look at the jump height. I'm looking at, okay, how are they producing from concentrically? How are they producing it eccentrically? How are we looking there? So that's kind of like how we'll break it down. And yeah, if someone needs concentric RFD, yeah, they might be doing like dead start movements. Whereas the person next to them, they might be doing just, for example, they're doing some tempo work, for argument's sake. So yeah, that's kind of like how we would differentiate it. If you're looking at the drop jump, and this is where it links into my quadrants. It's something I've used for a while, and it's become really popular now as well, which is really, really good to see. And I think it's a good way for me personally to work out what each player needs for different things. So if you use a drop jump, for argument's sake, in the past, I would have a certain metric in my head, and I'd be like, okay, well, if I've got this jump height and this contact time, well, then this is what we're doing. And that's fine. It still works for me. But then when you have to do that for 500 players, for argument's sake, it becomes quite tedious. So it was been good to be able to use quadrants to be able to put them on a plot. And it's like, okay, well, there's my 4 athletes. I've got my really powerful athlete who can absorb and produce force. I've got my athlete who is actually more velocity based, but their jump height isn't great. So, for example, when we're talking about the extensive session, it might be that the person who's the velocity based, who needs to get force, they might do a depth jump. The person who is needs contact time, yeah, they might just do generic arithmetic work, so pogos on the spot. They might actually do a drop jump. The player who's got a really, really, really good contact time and force production, they might do hurdle jumps, for argument's sake. So we've all got the same program. I know obviously a lot of people talk about individualization, and look, people who can do that, hats off to them. Probably linking in now with obviously having a child, it's now actually you have to focus on what's really important. And that's kind of, again, a way that I kind of use it as in, okay, look, these are my 4 athletes for this particular thing, and let's get it done, just get it out of the way. Whereas probably before, I probably have 3 weeks to really think about something, and I'm going to go and do this, and this. And yeah, the program was still effectively good in my opinion, but maybe I probably overcomplicated it. Whereas now I've got limited time. So it's like, I need things, I need to see it now. So again, with that 4th corner, then you're looking at a person who's got poor contact time and poor jump height. And that's where actually we're now having to, again, from that perspective, we're now developing a toolbox. It might be, for example, that their ankle ISO isn't great, so they might not actually be able to produce much force. It might be, so their car capacity might not be great. So there's loads of little things that you can look into that. But again, that's one way how I try to individualize within a prep session, that, you know, they might all have, again, they'll have individual work that might come from a medical team, and there'll be different players doing different things in terms of their tendon loading. But then when you come to the jumping now, there will be 4 different jumps, if that makes sense. So it kind of gives that, oh, okay, well, I'm doing something different to them. And that's where you're like, oh, why? Well, it's because of this. Oh, okay, so when they're next doing the jump, it's like, oh, like all of a sudden now they're engaged. Okay, I want to get better at this. And what was my score and stuff like that. So that was kind of one way that I started to use that. And again, it was more in isolation. It was like force frame. It was abductions good, and then obviously one's weak, one's strong, and then obviously the same with like Nordics and ankleizers and all the rest of it. But in the more recent years, I've now tried to like see the association between them. So for example, it's like, okay, drop jump, okay, it might be that I'm looking at the contact time, for example. So someone's contact time is really, really good. That means it could produce a lot of force. But does that link up to their ankleizer at 100 milliseconds? Also, are they a sprinter? Going off on a tangent now. So pitch-based player, when I say a sprinter, that's someone who's got a really good maximal aerobic speed, but then probably their aerobic speed is probably not the greatest. If they're a sprinter and their contact time isn't great and their force isn't great, there's probably an opportunity here that we can actually make this player a bit more efficient. Yes, you've still got your mechanics and all the rest of it, but if we're looking from an underlying perspective, these are the things now that I've started to do. And again, it's still an ongoing project, but then you start to see different things. So another one, and I know Val put it out recently, and it was a really good article, to be fair, was they're looking at obviously the hamstring and the adductors, because obviously, yes, adductors frontal plane, but obviously how they align together. And again, it's something I've done before, and I think it's really, really good, because again, if you just look at just Nordic and you look at just force frame, again, in their own identities, great. You might have an athlete who's really good, or they might be not too good at Nordic, but really good at a force frame. But then when you put them together, And then, for example, that player, there might be a sprinter, which means, yeah, they might do 300-400 meters of sprint in a game. We got to monitor something and change something here, because at some point, if, for example, their adductors are really weak and their hamstrings are really strong, or vice versa, one of the two may potentially have to do overtime. It might be that the hamstrings have to help with decel.
Yeah.
It might be that the hamstrings having to help with frontal plane work, and likewise, it might be that the adductors are now having to help even more with straight line running, sprinting, and so on. So that's something that I've tried to look a little bit more into. And again, it's very exciting. But again, that's something that's like in the background. And like you said, it's when you start putting them together, you might start seeing little trends like that. And you're like, okay, cool. I need to look out for this player. I need to look out for this player for this reason. But yeah, that probably links me into the bit of, like I said, with the pitch. And that's what I was talking about. You know, you've got 4 different players. You've got a flyer or a sprinter. You've got an aerobic player. And then you've also got your balanced player. And then you've got your player who's obviously poor. And again, like something I was trying to look at with that is like, is there any physical correlation between that? So haven't always seen much, probably more with the sprinters. But yeah, again, something that's quite, that I find quite interesting. There was something else I was going to actually say, but I can't think of what it was off the top of my head.
Well, Kieran, I was just going to get you. We can go back to that in a second. But I was just
Yeah.
because obviously everything you've done there in terms of giving context and detail around the strength program and how that relates onto the pitch, and also again how you've transitioned it as a practitioner, because I think we've got caught in football of everyone's got to get stronger, and then we make people stronger, we feel like they're at a really good strength level, and people start breaking down and we're like, well, actually what's next?
Yeah.
And I think you've done a really good job there of sort of diving into that on the context around why you plan things in and what you're looking for certain tests and how that suits individuals really well. I wanted to tap into kind of your background on the therapy side, the rehab side, also now working in the women's game. So what are some considerations from you if we're looking at prevention? And I know we can argue like injuries are going to happen, all the rest of it, but if we're looking at prevention, if we're looking at a prehab or whatever we want to call it, what are some key focuses for you now with the squad that you've got in front of you?
Yeah, I think for me, look, I don't necessarily like. Look, you can reduce risk. I think that's definitely something you can do. Can you completely eliminate it? Probably not. But if I link back to, for example, if you're talking about like the plate step down, for me, it's about having stabilization and strength at the knee, hip, and ankle first and foremost, but also having really good control. So on a day-to-day basis, we're always doing some form of like adductor work. So whether that be an isometric, whether that be long lever, whether that be short lever, whether that even be eccentric. Again, knee stabilization, really, really important. So can you have good alignment of your knee? Now, don't understand me, that's not going to be the only thing, because again, doing a step down, plate step down, or when you're doing your landing mechanics, again, really important. But for example, if on that day you're feeling really tight in your adductors, that might actually start to influence the valgus within the knee. So that's where the testing, especially on like a +2 for argument's sake, is really important to have a look at. And also looking at the ratio between the two. But for me, the biggest thing is, like I said, can they land like with good quality? Yes or no? Can we stabilize properly? Yes or no? Yeah, those are the two biggest things. But yeah, that then links into the movement capacity. It's just ensuring that, you know, you can look back and go, look, yeah, I've prepared them the best that I can. They've got good movement capacity. But yeah, it's something that I'm forever looking at, is like, how can I make it better? You know, are there any other little bits that I can add to it? But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, they're doing a lot of landing mechanics, a lot of landing mechanics.
And how does that, because you mentioned towards the start of training a female athlete as a female athlete.
Yeah.
How does that differ then, or does it differ to some of the work that you've done in the men's game, both first team and down to academy?
I wouldn't say it differs. I think probably one of the biggest things of having is an adjustable program. So, for example, if I went to an academy now, it's about how I adjust my program to my athletes. So what I mean by that is, when I was saying about don't treat a female athlete as a male athlete, is don't have the same benchmarks.
Yeah.
Just use that as an example. It might be that, you know, I've been in a past situation where it might be that at all the academies, they need to hit this. And if they don't hit this, it means there's something wrong. Well, actually, no, it's about actually understanding your environment, understanding that population that you're working with, but then also starting to have a look at, for example, when I first came in, it was like, okay, what are the most injuries that occur? Because again, naturally coming, you got ACR. Well, actually, it hasn't been. It's been hamstrings. It's been ankle injuries in terms of as a global thing. So again, it doesn't mean that you don't look at these things in terms of like ACLs. Of course you do. That's a constant thing that you're always looking at, and it's something that I kind of pride myself in. That, you know, fortunately we haven't had many at our football club. But again, when I'm saying that in regards to the female athlete, it's about actually understanding that they might think differently to how males think. Do you get what I mean? And it's also being very self-aware as well. And yeah, it's for me, again, like I said, I think it's made me a much better practitioner, because it makes you have to second guess things in regards to, like you said, maybe on the male side, we think of global injuries, we think about injuries as a whole, whereas I feel like, again, maybe it's more of the stigma when you first come in thinking, oh, there's ACL, there's this, there's that. But I think by having that when I first came in, it's made me hone in on those things a lot more. So like I said, having a good physical profile is really, really, really important. Like I said, being really strong through the hips, through the knee, and through the ankle are like very, very, very important things for me. So even if you take the knee ISO, for example, and you're thinking about decel, yes, you've got the movement side of it. Can you decel with good mechanics? But then it's like, can you actually produce good force? Because again, if we're looking at like the knee ISO and your peak speed your peak power, sorry, isn't very high. Okay, that's one thing. But then also, if you can't produce much force under 100 milliseconds, for argument's sake, or even earlier than that, to actually look at early braking, then that might be something that's underpinning. So yeah, I think it's always looking at like spinning the wheels. It's probably what I would say in regards to that. But as we all know, injuries can occur at any point. And again, you know, if we're talking about treating through the environment that you're in, it might be that, for example, in your past experiences at a male team, they have, I don't know, covered 50K. That doesn't necessarily mean that a female athlete has to cover 50K. It doesn't even mean that an academy player needs to cover 50K. So it's the same mindset. You know, if you work in an academy, you don't necessarily treat an academy, you treat a YDP player like a PDP player. So it's always being alert and having that mindset of actually like, and this could be in any sport, any athlete, that who are you working with? And it's really important to understand that, and, you know, maybe take certain things out of your head that, you know, you might be working with 16s and then you come down to the 14s of a different football club, or one will do what I did with 16s, but it's not necessarily going to work, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's having that holistic mindset and that holistic approach, but also with stuff like that, it's also using the people around you. Yeah. So it's using your physios, it's using your other performance coaches, it's using the nutritionists, because obviously there's that energy deficiency, things like that I wouldn't have even have been there's something that I wouldn't even have been aware of coming into the female game, and now it's something I am aware of, and it's something that affects both men and women, if you can get what I mean. But if I hadn't come across, I wouldn't really have necessarily would have heard of that at the time, and how that then actually can affect the female body in general and just general health. I think from those perspectives, it just shows how differently the person that you're working with and how holistic you have to have with that mindset. Same with like the menstrual cycle. I know that's a big topic for a lot of practitioners that work in the female game. And yeah, it's something that you have to be aware of, because different, but also within that, which obviously is another thing, is that each athlete is different when they're in different times of the cycle. So it's like, yeah, like if you follow research, like, oh, day 14, this is going to happen. Well, actually, no. For some players, they're completely fine. For some players, they're in agony. For some players, you know, it might be that you have to modify certain things on certain days. Again, you know, someone might have a really sore back. Okay, well, actually, let's alter the drill. So we can still do the work, but we might need to alter it because we don't actually want to accelerate. We don't want to continue to create more load in the back if you've already got a bad back, for argument's sake. So again, it's about thinking outside the box. It's the biggest thing that I would say. And when I say thinking outside the box, it's thinking outside the box that we've probably been in, because again, either sports therapy and S&C in my whole career in that perspective of my education, never did anything about female athletes. Never.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So it's really, I actually love the fact that I work with female athletes, because it allows me to become a better practitioner, a more rounded person. But again, when you're looking at it from that perspective, some of the universities haven't supported us the best. So no difference to when I first came in, I didn't know anything. Obviously, I knew things as an S&C coach, but I didn't know anything. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things when I came in. I came with a blank canvas. I didn't come in with, well, I've been at this club, this club, this club. I think one of my mentors, I can't remember who it was, but I said a good fair. Actually, I think it was Pete Mundy when we first came in, and he was like, in our very first lecture, And it was like, if someone's been at a club for something, doing something for 10 years, does that mean they're 10 years of experience or 10 years of doing the same thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and I was like, bloody hell, like when you look at it like that. So that's why when I've gone into different clubs, especially when I came into the women's role, I was like, blank canvas, see how this thing works. Okay, what do they do? What don't they do? What do they like? What don't they like? And really reserved myself first before then growing into things. And then, like I said, then you start to build and so on. So yeah, I'm not saying that universities probably don't, I'm assuming they do now. But, you know, I think it's really important that people understand that, because I think it's probably very easy for people, and not through naivety, just because they've probably not been taught anything different, to fall in the trap of, well, on the men's side, I was doing 4-4s with 100 kg. Now that's what we're doing, for example. And don't tell me there are players that can do that, but it's just having that generic approach. It's not. It's yeah. We have to be a bit more individualized. So yeah.
Man, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I think a lot of the messages that get repeated on this podcast, they get repeated for a reason. And I think one I take from what you've just said there is that you've got to ask questions going into a role, or whether it's with a new coach, in terms of where you fit, how you're going to support your players, what style of play are they going to use, what are the demands going to be. You mentioned about the distances that one team might cover compared to the next team. They could be different. Obviously, there's then, we're looking at individually the players, their experiences of S&C, their injury histories. There's a lot of context that goes on from squad to squad, isn't there?
No, I agree. Sorry to cut you. I agree with you on that. Sorry to cut you there. I really agree with you, because again, going into that first team environment, you've got people who have just come and got a pro, who again, depending on the structure that you've got at your football club, they might not have had a big exposure to S&C. And then you've got to think some of these players have gone from being a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old to straight to first team. You don't always see that on the men's side. Do you get what I mean? So already they're up against that challenge of, okay, not only do I need to develop, but I need to also perform at the same time. But then on top of that, then it's I've lost my train of thought. Then I was going to say something. But then on top of that, then you might have a 34-year-old who all it is they just need to keep ticking. They need to keep ticking, and for them it might be, look, I'm on my last season, for argument's sake, and I just need to get through each day. Their program might be the most simplest program you've probably ever done, but sometimes the simple things are just as effective. And I think that's probably the biggest thing about working in that environment, in a first team environment. It's actually about, okay, well, I've got my program that I really, really like. Okay, there might be players over that side that might do it. So like you said, refining the toolbox. But then actually, no, I need to break this one down, and this one down for these reasons. So yeah, you've got the task of like changing your program for different players, for different things. Like I said, some people might have had an ACL or this injury. Like I said, some people are in the last year of their career, so they might not need to lift heavy weights as such, because, you know, they lift heavy weights, it might make their knee blow up, for argument's sake. So it's like, okay, how do you now work around that? Start using complexes and different things, and working with the medical team to how can we efficiently still keep this player ticking along and still get everything that we need. So yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a good challenge. And yeah, I would always endorse people to stretch themselves to different environments. And yeah, I think it's probably the best role that I've had in my career to date. And yeah, again, very grateful for the role. And yeah, I think, like, you know, at some point, you know, when I maybe go into something new, at least I can come back and be like, look, I've come away from this role and actually gone, yeah, I've actually developed so much as a person and as a practitioner. Back to the whole thing with the child, like, I've got a daughter now. And so it's like, you know, yeah, it just makes me, you know, it just makes you think of so many different things now. And you look at things again in a completely different limelight. I know, yeah, I want her to hopefully be a WSL footballer, but we'll see. But yeah, it's like I said, it just opens your mind to so many different things. For some males, it's not until they have a child they start seeing things differently. Where I feel like I've been very fortunate that I've seen things from my working environment that's made me a better human. So yeah, I think it's definitely something I would always express to people, to challenge themselves in their environments.
Yeah, it certainly shifts your purpose, and it makes you a lot more efficient, I suppose, with your time, isn't it? When you have kids, and we could probably do a whole podcast in sort of parenting within coaching in itself. But I think I fully agree that it does sort of make that shift within your career as well. Kieran, you've done a brilliant job there, breaking everything in terms of what you've taken from previous roles, how you've transitioned and developed as a coach. I think people will take a hell of a lot from what you've discussed. We sort of spoke before we started recording. You said you're not done a podcast before. And
No,
you're one of the practitioners that is in the day to day, and that's why I love having
yeah,
people like you on the podcast, because we can get you to sort of speak about what you're doing day to day.
yeah,
But if people have got questions or they want to reach
yeah.
out, where would you direct them to go?
Let me just double check my phone. So yeah, if it's Twitter, then it's at KDB underscore S and C. If it's probably be the same on Instagram now. If it's Instagram, oh yeah, KDB underscore S and C. So yeah, it's the same on both. And obviously LinkedIn is obviously just my name. But and look, I'm always open to speaking to people and further learning myself really. And I do mentor a couple of students and stuff, and check in with them every couple of weeks. So I'm more than happy to help anyone. And I think that the only way we get better as an industry is by having that open mindset. And I think it's got better, to be fair. There's more practitioners now who are out there really showing what they're doing. Whereas I feel like maybe when I first started, even as a sports therapist, it was like, I'm not showing anyone. This is what makes me me. So, but I'm a big advocate of, I could show and present this to everyone, but it's not going to be the same because how you deliver it.
Yeah,
To
100%.
get what I mean? So I think before it was like people wouldn't want to share anything, but it's like, no, you can share everything. I can share everything that I do. But unless you've got that person's brain, it's going to come out differently. So yeah, I think it's really important that we share things, and not everything that I've said today is correct. It's correct for me, but doesn't necessarily mean it's correct across the board. And likewise, it'd be really good to speak to other practitioners in the women's game to hear their thoughts and stuff as well. So yeah,
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? If we share stuff and then it can start a conversation about things, that's got to be a positive. And that's where I
yeah, for
fully
sure.
agree with you that the more we can see insights into, and again, I agree, I think it has got a lot better. I think we could still improve as an industry.
Yeah,
It's definitely got better. So hopefully this adds to it, Kieran. I really
yeah,
appreciate
I appreciate it.
you coming on, mate. And yeah, if anyone's got questions, I'm sure they will reach out. But it'd be great to have you on again at some point, and I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you very much, and yeah, I'll be more than willing to come on again.
Top man. Thanks, Kieran.
Take care.